I never meant to fall in love on my father's fishing boat. But then again, I don't think anyone ever plans these things. They just happen, like the tide coming in, inevitable and unstopping, reshaping everything in their path. My name is Marcus. In the summer I turned 23, my father convinced me to spend 3 months working on his commercial fishing vessel off the coast of Maine. I just finished my degree in accounting, had a job lined up at a firm in Boston starting in September, and Dad thought it would be good for me to do something physical, something real, before I disappeared into a world of spreadsheets and fluorescent lights. He said it like that, too. Before you disappear. Like he already knew I was fading somehow. I showed up at the dock on a Monday morning in early June, the air still sharp with that spring cold that Maine holds onto like a grudge. The boat was called the Sarah May, named after my mother who'd passed when I was 12. Dad kept her picture in the wheelhouse, her smile frozen in time, forever young while the rest of us aged around her memory. That's when I first saw him. Ethan. He was coiling rope on the deck, his movements precise and practiced, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. He had dark hair that fell across his forehead, sun-weathered skin. And these hands, God, these hands that looked like they could tie any knot, fix any problem, hold anything steady in a storm. He was maybe a year or two older than me, wearing a faded blue t-shirt and jeans worn soft at the knees. "You must be the captain's son," he said, straightening up and wiping his palm on his jeans before extending it to me. "Ethan, I'm the deckhand. Been working for your dad about 8 months now." His handshake was firm, calloused, warm. I remember thinking my own hand felt soft in comparison, untested. "Marcus," I managed, trying not to stare at the way his forearms flexed as he released my hand and went back to his rope. "Your dad says you've never worked a boat before," Ethan said, not unkindly. "Don't worry, I'll teach you everything. The ropes, the nets, how to read the water. It's not as complicated as it looks once you get the feel for it." I nodded, grateful for his easy manner, not knowing then that his hands would teach me far more than seamanship. The first week was brutal. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache, hauling nets, sorting catch, swabbing decks, learning the rhythm of the boat as it rose and fell with the swells. My father ran a tight ship, efficient and professional, but it was Ethan who patiently showed me how to do everything, who caught me when I slipped on the wet deck, who demonstrated each knot 3 or 4 times until my clumsy fingers could replicate the movements. "Here," he'd say, standing behind me, his chest nearly touching my back as he guided my hands through the motions of a bowline or a clove hitch. "You want to feel it, not just see it. Your hands need to remember even when your brain forgets." His breath was warm on my neck during those moments, and I'd find myself holding my own breath, hyper-aware of every point where his body almost touched mine, where his rough fingers wrapped around my wrists to adjust my grip. I told myself it was just instruction, just normal teaching, but my heart would race in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Ethan had this way of existing in the world that I envied. He moved with confidence, with purpose, completely comfortable in his own skin. He'd grown up in a small fishing village up the coast, left home at 18 after his father kicked him out for reasons he didn't elaborate on, and had been working boats ever since. He lived in a small apartment above a bait shop, read poetry in his spare time, and had a laugh that came from deep in his chest and made everyone around him want to laugh too. We'd head out before dawn, the water black and silver in the early light, and return as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed impossible. During the long hours at sea, Ethan and I would talk. At first, it was just about the work, but gradually we started sharing more. I told him about my degree, about the job waiting for me, about how I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to be an accountant or if I'd just chosen it because it seemed safe and sensible. "Safe and sensible," he repeated one evening as we sat on the deck, the boat gently rocking in the harbor, our work done for the day. My father was in town getting supplies. "That what you want your life to be? Safe and sensible?" I looked out at the water, at the way the dying light played across the surface. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. "I thought I did, but being here, doing this, I feel like I've been living in my head for so long I forgot there was anything else." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I love about the ocean? It doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care what's safe or sensible. It just is. It demands you be present, right here, right now, or it'll swallow you whole. There's something honest about that. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and found him already watching me with those dark eyes that seemed to see more than I wanted to show. Something passed between us in that moment, something unnamed but unmistakable, like a current beneath the surface. "Ethan," I started, but he stood up quickly, brushing off his jeans. "We should head in. Your dad will be back soon." The weeks passed, and I got stronger, more capable. My hands developed calluses, my shoulders broadened, my skin darkened from the sun. But more than my body changing, something inside me was shifting too. Every day with Ethan felt like peeling back another layer, discovering parts of myself I'd kept carefully hidden, even from myself. There were moments that shimmered with possibility, when we'd both reach for the same line and our hands would brush. When he'd clap me on the shoulder after I successfully brought in a heavy net, his hand lingering just a second longer than necessary. When I'd catch him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, but that made my stomach flip. One night, about 6 weeks into the summer, we were caught in a storm. Nothing too dangerous, but enough that we had to stay anchored in a small cove, waiting it out. My father was sleeping in the cabin, exhausted from the long day, and Ethan and I were keeping watch, making sure the anchor held. The rain hammered the deck, the wind howled, and lightning occasionally lit up the sky like cracks in the universe. We huddled under the overhang near the wheelhouse, pressed close together for warmth, our rain gear slick and gleaming. "You scared?" Ethan asked, his voice nearly lost in the storm. "A little," I admitted. "You?" "Nah, I've been through worse. Besides," he turned to look at me, water dripping from his hair. "Storms don't last forever. They blow through, they change things, but then the sky clears." "Is that a metaphor?" I asked, trying to smile despite my nerves. Maybe. He was still looking at me, his face inches from mine in the cramped space. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." My heart was pounding harder than the rain on the deck. "What?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Never mind. It can wait. Storm's starting to ease up anyway." But I reached out, my hand finding his arm, holding him there. "Tell me." He looked down at where I was touching him, then back up at my face. "I think you know," he said softly. "I think you've known for a while, just like I've known about you." The world seemed to stop. The storm faded to background noise. It was just us, just this moment, just the truth hanging in the air between us like lightning about to strike. "I'm scared," I whispered. "I know. Me too." His hand came up to cover mine where it rested on his arm. "But I'm more scared of pretending. I'm tired of pretending, Marcus. I did that for years before I left home, and it nearly killed me. My father is asleep. And anyway, this isn't about him. This is about us, about what we want." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, sending electricity up my arm. "What do you want?" I'd spent 23 years being careful, being safe, being what everyone expected. And suddenly, standing there in the storm with this man who'd taught me how to tie knots and read the water and be present in my own life, I knew exactly what I wanted. "You," I breathed. "I want you." He pulled me closer, his hands coming up to frame my face, and then he kissed me. It was gentle at first, questioning, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't pull away. I leaned in, my hands fisting in his rain gear, kissing him back with all the longing I'd been suppressing for weeks. He tasted like salt and rain and something indefinably him, and it was the most honest thing I'd ever experienced. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the day you showed up on this boat looking completely lost." "I was lost," I said. "Maybe I still am. Then we'll figure it out together. If you want to, that is. I know you have that job in Boston, that whole life planned out. I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm just asking for whatever you can give me, for however long you can give it." The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and electric. Through the clearing clouds, stars were beginning to appear. "I don't want safe and sensible anymore," I told him. "I want this. I want real." We spent the rest of that night talking, kissing, holding each other as the boat rocked gently and my father slept on, oblivious. Ethan told me about his father's reaction when he came out, about the years of drifting from boat to boat, never staying anywhere too long, never letting anyone too close. I told him about the pressure I'd felt to be perfect after my mother died, to fill some impossible gap, to never disappoint my father or cause him any more pain. "You're allowed to live your own life," Ethan said, his fingers threading through mine. "You're allowed to want things, to be happy." I don't know how to tell him, I admitted, about us, about any of it. "You don't have to tell him anything until you're ready. But Marcus, you can't spend your whole life hiding. Trust me on that." The next morning, my father woke and found us on deck, carefully maintaining our usual distance, but I wondered if he could see the change in us, if it was written on our faces. If he noticed anything, he didn't say, just grunted his approval that we'd kept the boat safe through the storm and started preparing for the day's work. The remaining weeks of summer took on a different quality. We were more careful around my father, but every stolen moment became precious. Quick kisses when he went below deck, hands held briefly when we passed each other. Late nights after Dad went to sleep when we'd sit close together, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan introduced me to his favorite poets, reading to me by lamplight. I told him my dreams, the ones I'd never admitted to anyone, about maybe writing instead of accounting, about wanting to create something beautiful instead of just managing other people's numbers. "So do it," he'd say simply. "Life's too short for maybe someday." But as August drew to a close, reality pressed in. My job started in 2 weeks. I'd have to return to Boston, put on a suit, become the person I'd planned to be. And Ethan would stay here, working the boats, living his simple, honest life. One evening, with just 3 days left of my time on the Sarah May, my father called me into the wheelhouse. My heart hammered as I climbed the steps. Had he figured it out? Was he angry? But when I entered, he was just standing there, looking at my mother's picture, his weathered face thoughtful. "You've done good work this summer, Marcus. Better than I expected, honestly. You've got a real feel for the boat." "Thanks, Dad. Ethan's a good teacher." "He is." Dad turned to look at me. "He's a good man. I'm lucky to have him on my crew." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. "Yeah, he is." Dad was quiet for a moment, then said, "Your mother, she always wanted you to be happy. That was her main thing. Not successful, not rich, not famous. Just happy. I think sometimes I forgot that after she passed. I got so focused on making sure you were safe, making sure you had a good future, that I forgot to ask if you were happy." My throat tightened. "Dad, are you happy, son? With this accounting job, with the life you've planned?" I could lie. It would be so easy to lie, to say yes, to keep everything smooth and uncomplicated. But Ethan's words echoed in my head. "You can't spend your whole life hiding." "I don't know," I said finally. "I thought I would be, but this summer being here, I've realized I don't know what I want anymore. Everything feels different now." Dad nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. Different how? This was it. The moment. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. "I think I've been trying to be the person I thought you needed me to be. The perfect son, the successful one, the one who doesn't cause problems or worry. But I'm not sure that person is really me." "And who is the real you?" I looked out the wheelhouse window at the deck below, where Ethan was securing lines for the night, his movements sure and practiced. I'm still figuring that out. But I think I'm someone who wants to write, who wants to work with his hands, who wants... I took a breath. Who wants to be with someone who makes me feel alive. I waited for the explosion, for disappointment, for anger. But Dad just followed my gaze to where Ethan worked. After a long moment, he said quietly, "He's a good man." "You said that already." "I mean it. And if he's the one who makes you feel alive, then I'm glad you found him. Your mother would be glad too." I stared at my father, hardly believing what I was hearing. You're okay with this?" "Marcus, you're my son. I love you no matter what. And I'm not blind. I've seen how you two look at each other when you think I'm not watching. I just wanted you to tell me yourself, when you were ready." He put his hand on my shoulder. "The question is, what are you going to do about it? about the job, about Ethan, about your life. I don't know, I admitted. It's all so complicated. Life usually is, but here's what I've learned. The things you regret most aren't the risks you took. They're the chances you didn't take, the words you didn't say, the life you didn't live because you were too scared. Don't let fear make your decisions for you. That night I told Ethan everything. About the conversation with my father, about my confusion, about how I didn't want to leave him but didn't know how to stay. Come with me, I said suddenly. To Boston. We could get a place together. You could find work on boats there, or do something else. We could figure it out together. But Ethan shook his head gently. Marcus, I can't be the reason you run away from your life. You need to figure out what you want, not just react to what you feel for me. If you skip that job without knowing what you really want to do instead, you'll resent me eventually. And I couldn't handle that. So what are we supposed to do? Just say goodbye and pretend this summer didn't happen? No, we stay in touch. We visit when we can. We give you time to figure out who you are and what you want. And if we're meant to be together, we'll find our way back to each other. But it has to be your choice, made with a clear head, not just because you're afraid of losing me. I knew he was right, but it didn't make it hurt any less. My last day on the Sarah May was bright and clear, the ocean calm, the sky impossibly blue. We hauled in one final catch, and I tied my last knot, my hands now confident and sure. When we returned to harbor that evening, my father gave me a long hug and told me he was proud of me, not for the summer's work, but for being brave enough to be honest. Ethan walked me to my car carrying my bag. At the trunk, he set it down and pulled me into an embrace that felt like both hello and goodbye. Write to me, he said. Tell me everything. Tell me what you're feeling, what you're discovering about yourself. And Marcus, don't settle. Not for a job you don't love, not for a life that doesn't fit. You deserve more than that. What if I can't figure it out? What if I mess everything up? Then you mess it up. But at least you'll be living, really living, not just going through the motions. And I'll be here, waiting, hoping you find your way back to me. But only if it's what you really want. I kissed him there in the parking lot, not caring who saw, pouring everything I felt into that moment. When we finally pulled apart, both of us had tears on our cheeks. I love you, I told him. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I do. I love you too. Now go. Figure out your life. I'll be here when you're ready. I drove away watching him in the rearview mirror, standing there on the dock, one hand raised in farewell, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared. I did go to Boston. I started the accounting job, and I hated every minute of it. But Ethan was right. I needed to know for sure, needed to try the life I'd planned so I could recognize it wasn't the life I wanted. 3 months in, I quit. I took a job at a marine supply company, something that kept me connected to the water, to boats, to the world Ethan had shown me. And I started writing, really writing, pouring my heart onto the page. We wrote to each other constantly, long emails and texts, video calls that lasted hours. And slowly, carefully, I built a life that was actually mine. When spring came and the fishing season started again, I drove back to Maine. I found Ethan on the dock, preparing the Sarah May for another season. When he saw me, his face broke into that smile that still made my heart race. Hey, I said, my dad mentioned you might need an extra deckhand this season. I've got some experience, and I hear the guy who taught me is the best there is. Ethan laughed, that deep chest laugh I'd missed so much, and pulled me close. The position's yours, but fair warning, the deckhand might have trouble keeping his hands to himself. I'm counting on it, I said, and kissed him right there in the morning light. My father just smiled when he saw us together, really together, and said, "Welcome back, son. Let's get to work." That was 3 years ago. I still work the boats during fishing season, and I write during the winter. My first book, a memoir about that summer, was published last year. Ethan and I have a small house near the harbor, and every morning I wake up to the sound of gulls and the smell of salt air, my hand held in his. He taught me the ropes that summer, showed me how to tie knots that would hold through any storm. But more than that, he taught me how to be present, how to be honest, how to live a life that's real and messy and beautiful. He held my hands in his and showed me I didn't have to be afraid of who I was. Sometimes the best lessons aren't the ones you plan to learn. Sometimes they come from unexpected teachers in unexpected places. Sometimes they come from a deckhand on your father's boat who sees you more clearly than you see yourself and loves you anyway. Total char count, 16,847.